Hello, I'm Matt Galloway, and this is the Current Podcast. At the Francos de Montréal Festival earlier this month, the whole crowd was singing along with Ariane Roy and Lou Adrienne Cassidy. The song is called Fille à Porter. It's an anthem about breaking away from codependency. Someone threw a Quebec flag on stage, and Ariane raised it high in the air, and as the song ended and the applause swelled, some people in the crowd began to shout. Le Québec, mon pays. Quebec is a country. Both singers have declared their support for Quebec independence. They're part of a new Gen Z version of the sovereignty movement, and so is my first guest today. Alex Valiquette is with We Quebec, a nonpartisan civil society organization supporting sovereignty. Alex, good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. Today is Fête Nationale in Quebec, and you threw a huge party. 12,000 people showed up in Parc La Fontaine last night in Montreal?
Yes, and I must say 12,000 people with a majority of young Gen Z people in high school a lot. Yeah, pretty crazy.
How would you describe the moment that the independence movement is having in your generation right now?
Well, I think we're kind of like doing something that a lot of people have said that was impossible for a long time. Young people were the generation the least interested in independence, and something have been changing in the last years. Polls have been changing, and right now Gen Z is the generation the most leading for independence in the polls in Quebec. So I think there's something quite exciting. Generation that's like taking this cause with its own codes, its own values as well. And that's something that we haven't seen in a long time in Quebec.
What was the attraction for you to get involved in this?
Well, for me, it started with a desire of social change, of course, a pride of being Quebecois, and this feeling of being really different, and this desire of existing like other countries. Being known internationally for who we are, and engage throughout this process with the Quebec population to create a new country. The exciting part of it, the process part of it, of building a new modern country with a new constitution that actually represents and that represents well Quebec.
It's interesting. Before the last federal election, we were in Quebec City speaking with young people there who were in support of independence. And one of the things that they said was that they felt their generation had been given a raw deal, housing and the job market and the state of the economy. And the sense was that what you heard from people there is that they felt, could we do better on our own in some ways? Is that kind of the appeal as well?
I hear that a lot, of course. I think that young people, we've been raised at school with the fact that we don't have a clear future ahead of us, with climate change, with as you said, with the rent and the impossibility for us to buy home, and everything's expensive. So I think a lot of young people want to regain some kind of power, and sovereignty, I think, represents that. It's the idea to recuperate some form of power, build your own future as something that's exciting, as a social project. I think that a lot of young people as well, after the COVID crisis, felt a lot of isolation. And I think that's why as well independence comes back. I think we need more community, and that's the Independence Project, and it's always been important in the Independence Project Quebecois culture. And right now, new artists, as you said in the introduction, are taking discussion and reaffirming their pride of being Quebecois, and even saying proudly that they're independentists,
Does it help that, I remember speaking with people who were around during the 95 referendum, and they were scarred by the loss in 95. And I don't know when you were born, but a lot of the folks who weren't around then maybe don't carry that baggage. Does that matter as well?
I was born in 2001, so 6 years after the referendum.
Yeah.
So I think there's a really difference between the youth and their perception of the independence movement. Because for us, it's like sometimes it's almost like arrogant. Like it's like if this movement never existed before, because we're kind of like reinventing it and bringing it back. So there's this kind of arrogance towards the other generations that's really funny. But I think it's also what's different is that we don't have this humiliation that our parents felt when they lost it, and this this feeling of losing your country, of voting against your own independence as a nation. I think that's been something that was really humiliating for a lot of Quebecois in 1995. And I think we don't have this perception. For us, it's our perception in the youth is that we were so close to having it. So it's still possible to do it today, and to do it as well in a new way, I would say.
It's no surprise that one of the ways this is spreading is through music and online culture. And so I want to play a little bit of music here. We should probably just say, just a warning to our audience, you're going to hear some distinctly Quebecois strong language. Have a listen to this.
Ma fleur préférée, c'est la fleur de lys. La Saint-Valentin, je lui ai donné une fleur de lys. Des choses illégales, j'en fais pour la fleur de lys. Jean Chrétien, c'est un tabarnak, il a volé ma fleur de lys. Ma fleur préférée, c'est la fleur de lys. La Saint-Valentin, je lui ai donné une fleur de lys. Des choses illégales, j'en fais pour la fleur de lys. Jean Chrétien, c'est un tabarnak, il a volé ma fleur de lys. C'est fait stop dans le bac, comme la nuit des loups. Tous pour ça, je suis back sur la track, comme si c'était mon boulot. Venez les fêtes, a marché, et maintenant Kinji court. Vive le Québec libre, juste attends qu'il soit sourd.
That's Kinji and Fleur de Lys. Alex, tell me a little bit about that song.
Yes, well, this song last year was had a big impact in the Gen Z because it went viral. Just to put you in context, Kinji took this song out on social media when he was 17 years old. So really, really young, didn't even have the age to vote yet. And it just exploded on social media, and it created a big trend, but also a big discussion, because this song talks about like the lyrics are not really profound. It just says my favorite flower is la fleur de lys, which is like the symbol on Quebec's flag. For St. Valentine's, I gave her a fleur de lys. Illegal things, I would do it for the fleur de lys. And Jean Chrétien is beep beep because he stole my fleur de lys, referring to, of course, the referendum in 95 and the loss of it. So it's like this song of kind of like bringing back the hype for independentism in Quebec. And it went pretty viral, and viral as well internationally. Kinji has been touring in Europe, in France since. He's gone like 2-3 times, and it's pretty crazy. He played last year at the event that we were organized for la Saint-Jean, Independentist Saint-Jean. It was crazy.
I want to play one more song, and this is from one of the bands that played last night at your event. This is the Brown Family and Tomorrow Night.
C'est correct de croire en tomorrow night. C'est correct de mourir, on va renaître. Le soleil est back in the morning. C'est correct de mourir, on va renaître. J'mets un hold sur le chronomètre. Prêt à die for 100 likes. Croire en l'amour et le money rack. Ben que je travaille pour de quoi.
So that's interesting, because there's a real blend of English and French in a way maybe that earlier generations might not have embraced. Tell me about that.
Yes. Well, for us, we're all young people that organized this event of La Saint-Jean that we've organized yesterday, or between like 25, 27 years old. And for us, it's always been important to show that you could be Quebecois and sing as a Quebecois, and also sing for Quebec independence and sing in different languages. So even yesterday we had Brown Family, but we also had Talia Rosara, that's a Colombian Quebecois hyperpop singer that sings in Spanish and in French and embraces Quebecois culture and this independence project for us. I think we're trying to break the code, change the codes as well, and show that we don't care to break them, and that it's okay, because sometimes, older generations have this kind of sometimes rigid view of what Quebec nationalism was in their time, and sometimes there's this like temptation for them to tell us what to do, young people, and tell them, if you're not speaking that way or not doing that, that's not good for Quebec's future. And us, we're there just saying, we're proud of being Quebecois. We want Quebec to be a country, and we're mobilizing youth for that. But we accept the fact that today we grew up in a really diverse Quebec, and we speak different languages. And we do believe that Quebec, French is still, of course, at the heart of this identity. But we could, have fun and break those codes. Even, all our visuals for La Saint-Jean this year in the event that we organized were in green. So we don't, usually there's this classic blue, but us, we're just breaking the codes and we don't care. And we're still, in favor of independence and more than any other groups in Quebec, I think, and the youth.
I have to let you go, but let me ask you two quick things. One is, I know that your organization is nonpartisan, but the PQ, the Parti Québécois, has said that it will hold a referendum if it wins the provincial election this fall. What does that tell you? Are you supportive of that?
Well, I'm in support of independentist government, hopefully. But, us, the fact that we're nonpartisan is just another way of mobilizing for independence. Political parties can't throw a 12,000 Gen Z independence party in a park, and that's the action that We Quebec believes, building grassroots communities for independence, having these important discussions that we need to have, mobilizing artists. That's what we do, and we believe that the new independence wave for the next referendum needs to come more from civil society organizations, citizens, and not only political parties. And we really believe in that.
Just very briefly, what would you say? You're speaking to the rest of the country as well. So what would you say to people outside of Quebec about this moment? Because there are people, we've been talking about Alberta independence, and they would say, now is not the time to talk about this. You have a threat from the United States. You have a president who says he wants to take over this country. And if you talk about breaking up the country, there will be consequences for Canada writ large. What would you say to people across the country about that?
Well, first of all, I think I've been involved in the independence movement for a while, and it's never been a good time. We have always been told it's not a good time. It's not a good time. I think that, first of all, we don't have to see Quebec independence as something that's against Canada. And I really believe that, the way I think that Canadians express their desire to remain Canadian and not become American, I think we really need to understand that from a Quebecois perspective as well, that it doesn't mean that we hate each other, and that I think we will still travel and even stay good friends, because Quebec and Canada does share a lot of common values. But I think that we need to accept democracy and accept that things could evolve, and that Quebec and Canada could keep good relations even if Quebec decides to become independent. And I really believe in that.
Alex, it's really good to talk to you, and I hope we have the chance to speak again. It's important to hear from you, given the size of the crowd last night, but also what you're pushing for. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Alex Valiquette is responsible for communications at We Quebec. It's a nonpartisan civil society group promoting independence in Quebec. We'll be right back with more of the current podcast. Philippe J. Fournier is a political columnist for L'Actualité. He's the creator and editor-in-chief of the poll aggregator websites 338 Canada and QC125.com. He's in our Montreal studio. Philippe, good morning to you.
Good morning, Mac. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. What do you make of the enthusiasm that Alex is talking about? They got 12,000 people out to a park last night, young people talking about how they want to see Quebec become an independent nation.
Here's what I would say. I'm a numbers guy, so I will not, negate anything that Monsieur Valiquette just said here about the enthusiasm, because it is here. But when we look at the cold, hard data and the numbers, we see that when the Parti Québécois took a real hard hit in the 22 Quebec election, it just had over 14% of the vote. Back then, support for Quebec sovereignty was around 30% province-wide. And today, the Parti Québécois is the favorite to win the election in 3 months. It is leading in the polls. It has been leading in the polls for over 3 years. And support for independence is still hovering in the low 30s. So support for the PQ and support for independence has not been necessarily correlated. So I would say to that enthusiasm towards sovereignty is back on the table, but their movement has not grown in size in the last few years.
What do you make of who is part of the movement? Alex was talking about how the movement is trying to be much more inclusive in many ways and drew a line between his generation and perhaps earlier generations.
Well, this is an interesting point and strategy. Obviously, I think this is the way to go. If Quebec sovereigntists want to win the next referendum, they would have to reach out to the multicultural communities throughout Quebec. This is the way to do it.
Which is a big change. I mean, if you think of 95 and Jacques Parizeau, after the referendum results coming in, blaming, as he said, money and the ethnic vote.
Yeah, the problem is that when we look at the cold hard numbers, we see that if you're not a francophone Quebecois, the odds are you are not sovereigntist. And so these artists that are included in this movement, I think, is a great news for the sovereignty movement. But again, it's not a sign necessarily of growth. It is a sign of diversity, which I think would be positive. But I haven't seen in the numbers like the growth that they claim to have. So far, at least. You know,
when we were in Quebec City during the federal election last year, there were all of these Buy Canadian signs around town, which I think surprised a lot of people. What do polls say broadly about support for federalism versus sovereignty in the general electorate in Quebec? You've kind of hinted at this, but is there the room for growth, or is that fixed, those numbers?
There's definitely room for growth. Again, if we go back, and I know 1995 is starting to be pretty distant in the past, right? I'm in my late 40s, and I didn't vote in 95 because I wasn't 18 yet. So when we look at the numbers, and we see that the sovereignty movement hits a wall if it reaches closest to 40% in a poll. The no side, or the federalist side, or I would rather say the non-sovereigntist side, because I don't think many Quebecers identify as Federalist. But the non-sovereignist side is not organized right now because sovereignty has not been on the table. It has not been an election issue in many years. The Parti Québécois has not won a majority government in this century. And so I think it's pretty distant. And Monsieur Valiquette, what he referred to, he was born in 2001, I heard. Yeah. And so he's never lived through a majority government of the Parti Québécois. He saw the waning days of Bernard Landry. And so what I see when I see these sovereigntist campuses, when I see these organizations on campuses in cégeps and university, I see the sovereigntist camp getting ready for a new round of constitutional battles and perhaps a new referendum. But again, when we look at the progression of numbers, right now, we had a Léger poll that was released last week, and it was 70% against sovereignty and 30% in favor. That's not close. 30% is still a lot of people, 9 million Quebecers, 30% in favor of sovereignty, but that's not close to what they need to be competitive.
We're just about out of time. Yesterday, we saw the leader of the Parti Québécois repeat his pledge to hold a referendum on separation. You could have the election in Quebec this fall could very well overlap with the referendum, or at the very least the referendum on the referendum that Alberta is holding in October. What do you think, just briefly, what do you think that's going to be like?
Well, we've never had a referendum on secession during the age of social media. And so I think it will be a very interesting experiment to see how much foreign influence gets into the discussion. We know that they are U.S. agents and working online to destabilize Canada. And I think the Alberta situation and Quebec situation are entirely different in that respect. Monsieur Valiquette hinted to it. In Quebec, support for sovereignty permeates civil society. It's in unions, it's in environmentalists, it's in many parties, many political parties. Whereas in Alberta, it's just conservative. So it's a completely different dynamic. But it will be quite the interesting experiment to watch this fall because it will also overlap with the Quebec campaign.
We will talk again, I'm sure, as that campaign gets closer. In the meantime, Philippe, it's really good to have you here. Thank you very much.
Merci beaucoup et une bonne Saint-Jean-Baptiste à tous les francophones au Canada.
Merci. Philippe Fournier is a political columnist for L'Actualité and creator of the poll aggregate websites 338 Canada and QC125.com. He was in our Montreal studio. Your thoughts on this, if you remember 95 or you don't, and you're watching this unfold right now, you can email us, thecurrent@cbc.ca. You've been listening to The Current podcast. My name is Matt Galloway. Thanks for listening. I'll talk to you soon.